Till this day, this story has puzzled me to no end. I should say from the very beginning that I was really young, but I remember this incident vividly because of how scared I felt, and my parents have confirmed some aspects of this story. So, some background: born and raised in Miami to Honduran parents, so being Hispanic, spiritualism and religion sort of walk hand in hand for some. I grew up in an apartment building with a huge front yard. My mother would let me play outside with our front door because she could easily keep an eye on me, and the front yard was completely fenced, so I couldn't wander into the street. So on this particular day, I'm playing outside like any other normal day, and I remember that my mom is inside cooking. Like always, our front door is open, and I know for sure that my mom is inside, but that's when I hear it. Someone is calling out to me. I look around and I don't see anyone, so I continue to play, but then I hear it again, someone trying to get my attention. I look towards the end of our front yard, and behind the fence, I see my mom. She's standing there waving and smiling at me, trying to get me to go to her. I start laughing and running towards her because here I am, thinking we're playing a game. As I'm closer to this person, something doesn't feel right, like something is telling me not to trust this person, but I'm torn because I'm looking straight at my mother. It's her voice, her face, even the distinct white streak of hair my mom has that contrast her jet black hair. But still something doesn't feel right. I ask her what she's doing on the other side of the fence, and she tells me that we have to go, that I need to follow her now. She starts to walk towards the fence door, and I begin to follow her, almost entranced. She begins to tell me how much she loves me, and that we need to leave together. As we get closer to the fence door, she starts to tell me that I have to open it and walk out to be with her. I don't know what overcame me, but I said no. This upset my mom, and her demeanor changed. She starts to yell that I had to do it, that we needed to be together now. This scares me, and I began to cry. And then I hear it. My mom's voice coming from my house asking where I am. I run towards my house, bawling in hysterics. I see my real mother, and I hug her, and I tell her what happened. I tell her about the lady that looked like her, trying to get me to leave. And I just remember my mom hugging me and telling me that it was just in my imagination. Years later, this incident comes up in a conversation I'm having with my parents, and my mom is completely amazed that I remembered all of it so vividly. She also adds that weird things used to happen in that building, and that she suspects that the only reason that thing couldn't get into the property was because of an old Cuban lady that lived next to us. You see, it turns out that she practiced Santeria, and she was constantly blessing the grounds. So honestly, shout out to that lady. Here's where things take a very interesting turn. While me and my mom are reminiscing about what happened, my father is completely silent, and when we finished, he's in shock he didn't know about this happening to me, and he proceeds to tell us that when he was a child in Honduras, the same thing happened to him. A woman that looked like my grandmother would sometimes go by his house and tell him that they needed to leave to be together. My father is your typical male. Everything by the books, no nonsense, very skeptical about all this stuff. But at that moment, I saw fear in him. 18 years ago, me and 3 friends were driving to a party. We had not been drinking prior to this, had done any drugs. It's around 11 or 12 at night, and we pull up to a stop sign. My friend that was driving didn't know which way to turn, so him and another friend up front were trying to figure out which way to go. We're stopped there for about 15 seconds, and I look to the right and see what looks like a dog in the road. It's probably about 15 yards away from us. I suck at measuring distance, but basically close though to see the shape clearly, but not close enough to be able to make out any details. He was on all fours at this point. I then focus my attention to my friends in the front, but out of my peripheral, I see the creature stand up. At this point, my full attention is now on this creature. I scream, "What the F is that?" And everyone turns to look at it. It was about 3.5 feet tall, and its knees were bent inwards. It started walking towards us and got under a streetlight, but there was 0 features. No eyes, mouth, anything. Just a solid black figure. We book it out of there, and I look back to see the thing trying to chase us, but with its deformed legs, it wasn't able to run well. It's bothered me all these years wondering what it was, and we didn't really talk much about it directly after that. We all lost contact, but a few years ago I started thinking about that incident and started second-guessing what happened. I messaged the friend that was driving and said, "Hey, remember that one night when me, you, so-and-so, and so-and-so got lost looking for that party?" And he immediately responded with, "And we saw that thing in the road that tried to chase us? Has anyone seen anything like this before?" The inward bent knees is what really messed me up. I live in the USA in East Tennessee, if that can help narrow down what this creature may have been. How was my father in two places at once? First off, a little backstory on my dad. The man has so much character and color to him, though he is mostly a chilled-out grandpa at this point whose biggest offenses are the likes of placing a box of dead kittens in the topic hat when the family plays charades at the Christmas Eve get-together. When I was a kid, he was a crazy person. He was an amazing father, honest to a fault, and had character made of stone. He apologized when he felt he was wrong, and he would sit and cry with you when things were eating away at your self-esteem. However, as much as I owe him my morality and compassion towards others, I also owe him my extremely demented and nothing-is-sacred sense of humor. The man got more joy from life in tormenting his children than anything else. We lived on my grandmother's farm in rural Tennessee, and when the power would go out, which happened a lot in our area, he would dare me to run to the mailbox and then lock me outside at 10 o'clock at night when I'm about 10 years old, and he would laugh so hard I could hear him over my screams while I banged on the door from the outside, pleading to be let back in. He was the type of dad to wake you up in the morning by revving a chainsaw, change the clocks in the house to make you get ready for school at 2 a.m., and stand on the front porch in his tighty-whities while you were getting on the bus in the morning and yell, "I love you, I'm gonna miss you so bad," in a voice that could only imply that he was suffering from severe brain damage. In other words, he was always looking for a way to scare you, embarrass you, or just make you have such a crazy, unexpected experience that you would be guaranteed to remember him forever. And it worked. I love that man. Now that was needed for context, and this story takes place in my second to last year on my grandmother's farm. I was 17 and had been working a job in my small town stocking beer coolers and mopping floors at the local gas station. I was driving home from work in my little truck at about 10 p.m., and as I pulled into the driveway, my headlights shone up the hill to my grandmother's house and panned down the hill to the edge of our single-wide mobile home. I stopped immediately, all four tires in the driveway, pointing straight to end of that straight stretch of gravel. I could see my dad. His old flatbed truck and my stepmother's minivan were parked pointing to the left, at the base of our trailer. He was standing behind them, with his back to my headlights. Our chocolate lab, Cassie, sat at his feet, staring intently at him, paying no attention to the vehicle entering her territory, which was highly unlike her. I only stopped because it was so late and so unusual for my dad to be outside at this time. It was in the middle of the week. He was usually passed out in his recliner, wearing nothing but his underwear, with the History Channel quietly rambling on about the Civil War by this time. I slowly proceeded down the drive. Our driveway was about half a football field in length, and as I drove slowly toward the bottom of the drive, my dad began to walk, still with his back turned to me, and stepped behind the vehicles, the height of my stepmom's van fully concealing him. It took another 15 seconds from that point for me to reach the end of the drive, and I pulled my truck in on the side of his flatbed, leaving me closest to the road. I grabbed my big gulp and got out of the truck. "Dad?" No response. "Dad?" Still nothing. Immediately I got a bit creeped out, but then thought to myself nearly as quick, "This dude is trying to scare me again. He must think I didn't see him." I got down on my knee and peered under the vehicles. His left boot, unmistakable. Cassie's back legs and butt right beside him, tail tucked between her legs. I hollered out, "You're doing a crappy job of hiding Dad. I can see your boot sticking out from behind the tire on the van." I watched as his left boot slowly slid to the right until it was concealed behind the tire with the other. Still no response. I called for the dog. "Cassie!" She turned and literally scurried beneath the vehicles to get to me as if she was under heavy gunfire. She was whimpering when she got to me and acting very strange, as if she was terrified. She was acting how I would imagine a dog would act if they were constantly beat on, and I had never seen her behave that way before. When she got to me and I placed my hand on her, you could almost hear her breathe a sigh of relief. She was sticking to my legs like glue, and as I was still down on one knee and a bit off balance, she nearly knocked me over. I pet on her for a moment and tried to comfort her, but she seemed like she was afraid of something. With her tail still tucked between her legs, she pushed herself in between my legs as I stood up. It was after seeing how timid and odd Cassie was acting that I decided that I may be misreading the situation, and I might need to get into the house. My dad was surely a prankster, but when he was caught, he was caught. He never drug things out once we caught on. He would come out and say something like, "I guess you kids ain't as gullible as you used to be. I'm gonna have to start stepping it up a notch." Dad didn't drink much, and never got drunk really, but I couldn't think of what the root of this odd behavior could possibly be, and it really started to weird me out. I made one last attempt at communication. "Dad, I know you're there. I saw you when I pulled in the driveway. The jig is up. What are you doing out here?" No response. I started around the front of my truck to round the vehicles and walk over to him. Cassie began to panic and whimper loudly, still glued to the inside of my ankles, crouched to the gravel with her head darting back and forth wildly. I stopped in front of my truck. I stand there for another moment in silence, waiting for something, but not sure what, and then announce, "Welp, I'm heading in. See you in a bit, weirdo." I turned to walk to the front porch, unconsciously building speed as I hit the first step. Cassie drops back and doesn't follow me onto the porch, but seems to sort of stand guard at the foot of the steps. Keys in hand, I'm already searching for the deadbolt key. Panic is building in my chest, but I'm not sure why. I hurriedly unlock the door and jump into the house, swing around and slam the door behind me, locking the deadbolt all in one fluid motion. From behind me, I hear a voice yell, "What the hell?" I spin around. My big gulp drops to the floor and explodes across the living room floor. There sits my dad, in his underwear, sitting up from a deep sleep in his recliner. I begin to hyperventilate and yell through gasps of air that there is a man in the driveway hiding behind the van. I thought he was you. I was talking to him, Dad. I nearly collapsed into the floor. Within 15 seconds, my dad is running out the back door of the house with a spotlight and a handgun, still wearing nothing but his underwear. He was outside for what felt like forever. When he came in, he was pale as a sheet. He said someone was definitely out there, but he couldn't see them. He could hear them running, but when he pointed the spotlight in the direction of the footsteps, there was no one there. Crazy thing is, our trailer sat at the front of a 150-acre cornfield, and it was off-season, so everything was tilled down to the dirt. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. It was a terrifying experience, and I know it's one that seems easy to explain. My brain really wants to tell me that I had just foiled a car thief or something, or maybe even stopped a possible home invasion. The thing is, though, my dad has an unmistakable posture, and an even more unmistakable walk. I know those were his boots I saw under the van. I also know that if he had somehow set all this up, I would have heard about it for years, because it would have been one of his favorite stories to tell, how he scared me so bad when I was 17, and how funny it would have been. He does tell people about this from time to time, but he always ends with the same detail, that it wasn't until he was outside running around in his underwear with a handgun that I realized that Cassie had been sleeping in the floor next to his recliner when I ran in the door. I was celebrating St. Patrick's Day in Boston several years ago when I was in college, and I realized that I had to pee really badly, but there wasn't anywhere I could go. I decided to go into a random building and peed in a ginger ale bottle inside of an elevator. I closed the bottle just in time for the doors to open. I proceeded to walk outside with the bottle and then threw it in the garbage can. I walked away, and for some reason I turned around and I saw a man in a suit walk right up to the garbage can and pull the bottle out of the garbage can and put it in his bag, and then he looked right at me and then just walked away in a hurry. He wasn't a weird or strange-looking guy. He didn't look homeless, and he didn't look like he had mental problems. It looked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He must have felt how warm the bottle was, but he just grabbed it and secured it in his bag regardless. I will never understand why this happened, and I frankly don't want to know, but it was the weirdest and creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, aliens, monsters, they were all just stories to me. But after what I experienced in the Southwest, my perspective on the unknown has been forever altered. I was on a road trip with my best friend Jake. We had decided to take a detour through the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, mainly because of the scenic beauty and the rich history of the area. We had heard tales of skinwalkers, but we laughed them off. They were just myths, right? Our first day on the reservation was uneventful. We visited a few local spots, interacted with some of the locals, and set up camp near a canyon. As night fell, we sat around our campfire, sharing stories and enjoying the serenity of the desert. Around midnight, Jake decided to turn in. I stayed up, mesmerized by the stars. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, and I felt a profound sense of peace. That is, until I heard it. A low guttural growl echoed through the canyon. I froze, thinking it might be a coyote or a mountain lion. But then, I heard a voice. It was distorted, as if someone was speaking through a broken radio, but it was unmistakably Jake's voice. "Come here!" it beckoned. Confused, I turned to our tent. Jake was sound asleep. The voice called out again, this time from the opposite direction. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it towards the source. What I saw will haunt me forever. Standing on a ridge was a figure. It looked like a man, but its limbs were elongated and its eyes glowed a sickly yellow. It wore tattered clothing and its skin was a mottled gray, but the most disturbing part was its face. It was Jake's face. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The creature mimicked Jake's voice again. "Come here." It took a step towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I bolted to the tent, shaking Jake awake. "We need to go, now!" I hissed. He looked at me, confused, but the urgency in my voice spurred him into action. We packed up as quickly as we could, the creature's voice echoing around us, mimicking our voices, our laughter, our conversations from earlier. As we sped away in our car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The creature stood in the middle of the road, watching us, its yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town. We checked into a motel, and I spent the night researching skinwalkers. The legends said they were witches who could take the form of animals or people, using their voices to lure victims. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I do know one thing. The stories are real. The Southwest is beautiful, but it holds secrets that are beyond comprehension, and I'll never set foot on the Navajo reservation again. To all of you reading this, please be careful when you venture into unknown territories. Some legends are rooted in truth, and some nightmares are very, very real. I've had many experiences, but I'll tell you one that freaked me out because I wasn't the only witness. I was about 12 years old, and I was talking with my dad in his room. My mom was in the closet with the lights off, but we could clearly see her folding clothes. Well, during me and my dad's conversation, he had asked my mom something, but to no reply. He eventually got to the point where he started to yell. I got up and stepped into the closet, but then I heard my mom walk into the room and ask why he was yelling her name. I looked at her and she had a towel wrapped around her. I quickly looked back into the closet and saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. This obviously creeped me and my dad out. Whatever we saw, it wasn't my mom. Whatever it was, it had her shape, and even the bun. My mom always had her hair in a bun. I would have completely thought this was my imagination, if it weren't for my dad also being there and seeing it too. I think my son is seeing the man that died on our property. My son tells me creepy stories all the time. He'll tell me that he met a boy playing at our house built in early 1800s, alone with a name I've never heard that fell in with the pigs. We don't have pigs, but the farm did at some point. And he got really hurt, but then he was fine. And now he sees him around the property. He also sees a girl that was playing outside and had to lay down, but she didn't fall, and it was really, really cold, but she couldn't get up, and then she went to sleep and died, and her parents cried a lot, but then she came back. But they still cried because they couldn't see her. Okay, fine, but this is where it got me. When we moved in, he said there's a man in the driveway. I don't see anyone. He said he's right there. He's done this before at the last place. But this time he asked me to close the curtains and that he's not nice. Today I asked him if he remembered the guy from the driveway that I couldn't see. He said, yes, I didn't like him. He was not nice. I asked him why he wasn't nice, and he said not nice things. I asked him to tell me more. He said it's not safe for mamas and dadas to drive anymore. That's what he was saying right there in the property with his car. I didn't like that. The crazy part is that there is a cross on my neighbor's land beside ours. A young man crashed his car into a metal arch that used to be cemented at the road, flipped and landed on their land. The bent arch remains on our property because it's too big and heavy to move, but it sounds low the arch isn't all that's here with us. Asterisk, we never watch scary ghost stuff because I don't like it. I've had dreams of people who have passed trying to speak to me since I was a kid and try to suppress it, so I have not encouraged it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a comment below. Your feedback helps me create more content you'll love. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more updates. See you in the next video!